Alright, so the use of TypeScript has been around since Angular 2, and it's a huge part of the Angular community. Now, TypeScript is not mandatory in order to create Angular applications, but the amount of code and complexity that you would need to just write in straight JavaScript is not even close to being worth not using TypeScript. Plus, it offers a bunch of extra benefits. So, what is TypeScript? It's a superset of JavaScript created and maintained by Microsoft. So if you don't know what I mean by superset, it's basically everything JavaScript is plus more. It's JavaScript with some extra features. And it all compiles down to regular JavaScript code. The browser can't natively parse TypeScript, so it has to be compiled down to regular JavaScript. Alright, and TypeScript includes many ES6 features and is completely compatible with ES6, okay, which is ECMAScript 6 or ES 2015. It's basically the newer version of JavaScript with a bunch of added features. Alright, now let's take a look at some of those features that are included with TypeScript. So first we have static typing, hence the name TypeScript, and I'll go over static typing in a second. We also have class-based objects. If you're familiar with real object-oriented languages like Java or C#, it allows us to use that type of syntax. We can import and export modules with TypeScript. We can use let and const in replace of var, and this gives us some extra scoping. Also, we can use some other ES6 features like arrow functions. So like I mentioned, TypeScript has to compile down to regular JavaScript, and we need something called the TypeScript compiler to do that, also called TSC. Now this is included with the Angular CLI as well as the Quick Start, and it compiles TS files or TypeScript files down to JS files on the fly. So when we save a component, for example, it's going to automatically compile our TypeScript down to JavaScript. Okay, you can also use TypeScript alone without Angular by simply running npm install TypeScript, and this will give you that TSC program, and you can use that to compile manually. Okay, and you can also compile to ES5 or ES6. Alright, so regular JavaScript is not statically typed, meaning that we don't have to define our variable types or our value types. We don't have to say a certain variable is going to be a string or a number. And to many people that's a good thing because it offers less code and more freedom, but it can also be a bad thing because it makes your code much less organized and more error prone. So with TypeScript we can define types for our values, but what's even better is that it's completely optional, so we don't have to use static typing. It's not forcing us to do that. It's completely up to you. So let's take a look at a very simple TypeScript example. So here we're defining a variable called name, and we're statically typing it to a string. Okay, so we're saying whatever is put in this name variable has to be a string. If we try and put a number or something else in there, TypeScript is going to give us an error telling us to fix it. Alright, now in addition to adding types to plain variables, we can also add types to function parameters, and function return values. So you can see here we have a function called addNumbers with two parameters, num1 and num2, and we're saying that both of these have to be a number. Alright, and then we're also saying the return value for this function has to be a number. And you can see we're returning num1 plus num2, which will be a number, so everything should be fine in this situation. But we can assign types to variables, parameters, and function returns. Now, as far as available types in TypeScript, we have strings, numbers, booleans, which are true or false values, arrays, any, which means just that, we can have any type, void, which means that there's no return type, null, tuple, which is kind of an ordered array, and I'm going to give you some examples of these later on. Now, as I mentioned, we can use classes in TypeScript, which look very similar to what we would do in something like Java or C#. We define a class, we can give it properties, which are kind of like attributes, and then we can define methods, which are basically just functions inside of a class. We also have a constructor, which is a special kind of method or function that will run when the object is created from the class, or in the case of using an Angular component, when the component's initialized. And then down here we're just instantiating an object from the greeter class, and we're passing in a parameter of world, which is going to go into the constructor. Okay, and you'll learn more about this as we move along. All right, so I just wanted to give you kind of a brief introduction to TypeScript. There's a lot more to it, but we're not going to exclusively focus on TypeScript too much. We're going to just use the parts of it that we need to build an Angular application. All right, so in the next section, we're going to jump in. We're going to start to look at components, modules, templates, and everything else that has to do with Angular 4.